Hello again. I'm happy to be here and I appreciate you being here once again. As you know, this course is called Social Entrepreneurship, a Grassroots Revolution. What I'd like to do today is apply that scale that I developed to a project idea. That scale is one that is intended to identify strengths and weaknesses. But as I've done with other class sessions, I'd like to first mention the MOOC web address. You can find just about anything related to this class at that site. Also, I'd like to mention the Facebook page. All you need to do is search for Social Entrepreneurship Program. And also, again, I'd like to mention the optional book. This is not needed to excel in this class, but it is available for those who are interested. In my last video presentation, I shared a 10-item scale that I put together to help us identify strengths and weaknesses of our project ideas. And I'd like to, just for simplicity, call this Keith's scale. In this presentation today, I will apply this scale to a project idea. I want to show how I use the scale with the hope that you will feel comfortable using the scale yourself. As a reminder, here are the 10 items. Seriousness of the problem, amount of human labor required, level of skill of human labor needed, financial cost, ability to obtain volunteers, ability to generate sales, ability to obtain grants and donations, emotional support from clients, emotional support from the local community, and bureaucratic challenges. So, project idea 1. I'd like to talk about teaching English to recently arrived refugee elders. And let me share my story about this project. I'll do this very briefly. It was about 4 years ago that I became aware of a metropolitan area, a city in a different state than where I am, that was having an influx of refugees. People who were having pressure put on them, essentially being forced to leave their home country and settle in another location. I became aware of 2 nonprofit corporations. They were both 501c3 nonprofits that were interested in working with the refugees in this metropolitan area. I made contact with these 2 nonprofits and offered to do some volunteer work to contribute whatever services I might have for free. And primarily I was thinking about some project development. They were interested in my assistance, and so we talked. I learned more about the situation, and I suggested that perhaps it might be useful for us to conduct a needs assessment. A quote, needs assessment is an attempt to identify the needs within a category of people. And this is oftentimes a very good beginning point to start a project. And the people involved in this metropolitan area with these 2 nonprofits were interested in this, and so I decided, I suggested that maybe for us to have some focus groups would be a good way of identifying needs. So I conducted several focus groups, and we found a number of things from these focus groups. I'd like to report what we found. We found that children, one of the issues, and the one that I'm going to be focusing on in the presentation today, is that we found that children and middle-aged refugee adults learn English fairly quickly, but some elders have difficulty. We also learned that refugee elders oftentimes lose authority within their families because of their low English fluency. What happens is that the elders in the family are dependent on other people, younger people, children and grandchildren, to translate for them in their new country. And as a result of this dependency, the elders in this refugee community were losing authority within their family. In families with a traditional orientation, having elders lose authority causes disruption in the family structure. This family disruption can add to the stress of adapting to a new country and increase problems, especially with refugee youth. The problems that were occurring within this refugee community, there was coming to be a real problem with joining gangs, street gangs in this metropolitan area. And along with that was some crime, violence. Also accompanying this was reduction in school attendance and dropping out of high school. So some of the common problems that are associated with this type of situation. One important issue for us here is that sometimes simple project actions, such as teaching English, have deep consequences, such as strengthening the family and helping youth. This is a really important point for us to keep in mind throughout this course, and also when you are on your own as a social entrepreneur, that sometimes the specific issue that we're addressing, in this case teaching English, it might have much more significant consequences, deeper consequences, in this case, such as strengthening the family and helping youth. So the project idea is simple: to start special English classes for refugee elders. Two important parts of this new class that I have in mind, that we had in mind at that time, were the following. The teachers will be fluent in the first language of the refugee elders, and the class will move at the speed of the learning of the elders. Neither of these situations existed with the English classes that were available to these refugees at the time. The teachers were fluent only in English, not the teachers of English as a second language. The classes that were available in English in this metropolitan area were taught by people who were fluent only in English. They were not fluent in the language of the refugees. This obviously creates some problems in a class. The second situation was that these classes, these ESL, English as a Second Language classes, they were moving at a fairly rapid rate. It was clear that there was an intention to finish the classes by a certain amount of time. And so this was a problem for these elders. They reported to me in the focus groups that they would arrive in class, the teacher would go over information, would look at their homework. It was clear to the teacher that the elders did not understand last week's lesson plan, and yet the teachers of the ESL classes would then move to the next lesson. So the teachers were moving too rapidly for the elders. As a general project idea, in the early stage of consideration, let's apply that scale that I developed and see what strengths and weaknesses emerge. This is the time to apply, this is the time within the project development process that is a good time to apply that scale that I've put together. We want to apply the scale to our project idea fairly early. It's after we've had a time to formulate our idea fairly well. We feel like we have a decent handle on our idea. But we want to apply this scale before we've invested extensive amounts of time in research and development of our project idea. So about this time period before we've invested a lot of time in research, but as a result of having enough time to formulate our idea fairly well, that's a good time to apply this scale. Recall that there are 10 items in the scale, and the range of points is from 0 through 10. I think in a previous presentation I mentioned that the range was from 1 through 10, but I would like to change that to 0 through 10. A low score on an item indicates a problem for the project idea, and a high score on an item indicates a strength of the project idea. As a reminder, when a single person scores these items, there's probably significant bias, especially if the person scoring is the originator of the project idea. I encourage us to ask several thoughtful people to provide scores. So I need to confess right now that for this presentation I have not involved other people to provide scores. The scores that you will be seeing are the ones that I've come up with. They're just my best hunch, my best guess at an appropriate score. So these scores are biased, and I encourage, both when I do this and when you do this for something serious, that we will both use other people to be involved in the giving of scores. I'm about to suggest scores on the scale items, but I'd like to remind us of the project idea. It is to teach English to refugee elders to strengthen the refugee families. The first item is seriousness of the problem. And recall that a high score indicates a strength for each item. And so in this case, high seriousness would result, if it's a serious issue, it would result in a high score. And as I reflect on this, the best I can do, just in my thinking, is it's about midpoint in terms of importance, about a 5 on the issue of seriousness of the problem. The next item is amount of human labor required. And so a high score is going to indicate a strength of the project. And so if there's a high skill level required, this is a potential detriment to the project, and so that would receive a low score. So on the issue of amount of human labor required, I'm seeing this as a pretty good situation. There's not a lot of human labor required, and so I give this item a pretty darned high score. The next item is level of skill of human labor required. So a high score is going to indicate a strength for the project. And so in this case, if there's a high skill level required, then this is a potential detriment to the project. And so a very high skill level would receive a low score. And I'm about a midpoint on this one also. There is some skill required. Indeed, there would be a bilingual person, a person who is fluent not only in English, but also fluent in the language of the refugees. The next item is financial cost. A high score is going to indicate a strength of the project, and so in this case, a high cost would indicate a low score, and a low cost would result in a higher score. So I'm seeing this as a pretty inexpensive project, which is a strength. And so I'm assigning a high score to this item of financial cost. The next item is ability to obtain volunteers. And so a high ability to be able to obtain volunteers would result in a high score. And I see this project as pretty compelling. And so I believe that this project deserves a very high score of 9. The next item is ability to generate sales. And so for projects that have a high ability to generate sales, this would be a strength of the project, and so that would justify a high score. And I'm not seeing a lot of opportunity here, but there is some, and so I'm giving a midpoint score on this dimension. My thought is that perhaps these are people from another country, and perhaps they would be able to, perhaps some of these elders would have some skills that could result in some craft work that people in the United States might be very interested in. And maybe this craft work by the elders could be sold and could raise money to help pay the cost for this project. So I don't know that this is the case, and I'm reluctant to give a very high score on this, but I'm aware of this possibility. It's an idea, and so I've settled in on a midpoint of score of 5 on that item, ability to generate sales. The next item is ability to obtain grants and donations. And so a high score is going to be a benefit for the project, and so if there is high ability to obtain grants and donations, then this would result in a high score. And since I view this as a pretty compelling project, I give it a very high score of 9. The next item is emotional support from clients. And a high score would indicate high support from the clients. And based on the time that I spent with these clients in this metropolitan area, it's clear to me that there is very high attachment, very high emotional support for this project. So I give it as high a score as I can, a 10. The next to the last item is emotional support from the local community. And here again, if there is high support, then this would result in a high score. And I haven't collected data from the community, but from what I understand by talking with people, that there would be very high support for this project. This project would be helping refugees become more assimilated into the mainstream of the community. And so I believe that community members would be very supportive of this project. The final item is bureaucratic challenges. Are there very many bureaucratic hurdles that would need to be jumped in order to initiate this project? And I'm seeing that there would not be. I'm seeing that startup for this English as a second language program for elder refugees would not involve very many bureaucratic hurdles. And so I give it a very high score. Okay, so what do we have here? How does this project idea score? Well, here's what I have. I think these are the scores that I indicated. When those 10 scores are added together, it totals 80. And based on my experience in applying the scale to project ideas, that's a pretty high score. It's a fairly unusual score to be in the, it's a fairly unusual project to score as high as the upper 80s or even get into the 90s. So this is a pretty high score. We have an average per item score of 8 out of 10, and so that indicates that this project has scored very well. Let's take a closer look at the 3 lower scores. These are seriousness of the problem, skill level required, and ability to generate sales. These were the lowest items as they scored, and each one I gave a 5. The seriousness of the problem, this is an interesting issue to me. A lot depends on how we conceptualize the problem. If the problem is simply that refugee elders are not fluent in English, that is not very compelling. We know from understanding some of the other problems of the situation, we understand some of the consequences of the elders not being fluent in English. They are dependent on younger people in the family to translate for them. And here we have people who should be authority figures in the family actually being dependent on younger people. And so the point here is the score of seriousness of the problem. If all we do is conceptualize this as a project to teach English, then that's not going to be very compelling. If we conceptualize the project to teach English in order to strengthen the family for the purpose of helping all members of the family, but especially young people, then that type of conceptualization might result in us having higher scores. Skill level required. Take a look at that. There's a moderate level of skill. We need a bilingual person, a person who's fluent in the language of the refugees as well as fluent in English. I don't see any way to work with this issue. We're pretty well stuck with a moderate to highly skilled person. And so I don't see an opportunity to improve that score. Ability to generate sales. Here again, if we would want to collect additional info, or if I would, since this is an issue that I've been involved with, if I would at some point go to the trouble to collect more information to see if some of these elders had some skills that could be converted into some craft work, and if they do have those skills, would they be interested in creating some of their crafts and offering these for sale in order to help pay for this project. With some additional data collection, there might be an opportunity to increase the score on that item, ability to generate sales. But with the level of knowledge that I have of the situation right now, I'm not interested in giving a very high score on that. I view this project idea as having merit. In fact, I'm a little bit excited about this project. It's solid in a number of ways. If anyone wants to use this idea in your community, please, it is yours to use. If you find yourself in a situation that may be somewhat similar to this metropolitan area with which I was working, if you see any pieces of this project that might be useful to you, maybe you need to work with it more, add to it, maybe subtract, whatever, please feel free to use the idea if you feel that it might have some value to you. I am a fan of simplicity. If there are few moving parts, less can go wrong. Although big, complex projects are important in our world, I encourage you to focus on simple projects. Some simple projects will catch fire and grow to big, complex, wonderful projects. Let bigness emerge, but don't start with bigness in your project ideas. That is simply my suggestion to you. You're going to be in charge. You will know what is best. You will be an entrepreneur and be able to chart your own course. My simple suggestion is that it's good to start small. Thank you for spending time with me again. I've enjoyed it. I look forward to the next presentation.